Alright, it's Perry Mason with Invincible Extremes. Today I have the rear end from the GTO that I'm building, this car right here. And I'm taking out the 10 bolt as soon as I can and replacing it with this 9-inch that I got out of an F100. If you've seen the other 9-inch videos, you know where I'm at. Anyways, I finally bought a welder that uses 220, so I got the penetration I need. And I was able to weld all these brackets on. I made like a little cardboard mock-up to get the angles and the distance right for these upper ears. It follows through right there and so on. It's 9 inches center to center. Get the dimensions. The dimensions from here to here are just shy of 35 inches. The shocks are 49 and a half. And just make sure you get all the dimensions off your old rear end if you're going to be making a rear end from scratch. This one is an inch shorter than the one that's in there, so it's a 64 through 67 style rear end, but the brackets are 68 and up because that's what's in there now. So it'll give me a little bit more clearance for the current wheels I have. Really, there's no difference. You just gotta find the wheels you need. This is what the disc brake looks like assembled, more or less. I don't have the pads on there, and the disc brake cables and stuff like that's not hooked up. One thing you'll notice is the anti-moan is what it's called. I don't know why. Stuff can't work because of the shock plate in the back. Here, I'll show you that right there. So this is the A-body shock plate, whereas you would have to either drill a hole right here, which I'm not gonna, or do something to install this right here. So I'm gonna walk you through installing the disc brakes. First off, these disc brakes are set up for the car pattern, not the truck pattern, and so it's set up for the 3/8 bolts. So first thing you'll need to do is when you get axles, these are 31 spline axles. I went from the 28 spline axles that the truck originally had, and the truck was originally a wide truck pattern, and I'm using on a body, so it's going to be, so this is a Chevy pattern, obviously. So I had to open up the holes in order to fit on the truck bearing retainer flange. That was the first thing I had to do. The second thing I had to do is, before I press the bearings, now these axles would be in and out, so never mind the fact that they're dirty. Before I pressed the bearings onto these axles, I had to press this little preload ring, is to make up for the space on this right here. Is there's a little bit of extra space, and so for the axles to have the proper preload on the bearing and retain the axles, they you have to have a little ring. Now these axles also came with the retainer, the bearing retainer that was set up for a car pattern, so I can't use it today. Can't show you guys, sorry. But we'll just proceed without it. At this point, you wouldn't thread these nuts on the T-bolts because that's what holds the bearing retainer on. But like I said, since I don't have one, steel dust off of here. Since I don't have one, I'll go through the motions. So you slide the axle in next. This piece of tubing is gonna represent my center trunk. So you would do it with this pumpkin already installed, and you would put it in the carrier. Anyways, you slide the axle in. And use a rubber mallet or something. Don't use an actual hammer because you don't want to mess the axle up. Rubber mallet. or a dead blow, those plastic hammers, don't use metal because you'll destroy the threads on the studs. There's all kind of damage you could do. At this point, then you use a bearing retainer. I'll show you what the bearing retainer looks like. Like I said, mine's set up for the 3/8 bolts for a car pattern. So the ring would go on right there. And the bearing retainer would then be tightened down, holding the ring and the axle in place. At that point, if you had another axle, like for a Camaro or something, you would install this anti-moan plate right here. But being an A-body housing, that is not possible. So take these 3 little bolts and the dust shield. This is the same dust shield that's on a 2011 Mustang, if you guys were wondering. For demonstration purposes, I'm just going to finger tighten them. Obviously, there's the instructions are supplied with the kit when you buy it, and the instructions will tell you how much to torque this all down to. Now, then you're going to take the rotor. Now again, this is a GM vehicle, so it's going to be GM stud pattern, and these brakes come in a Ford pattern. So you're going to have to open up the wheel holes in order to fit over these studs. Now a lot of people would probably comment in the sections and say, hey, wouldn't that be out of balance then? And what I have to say is the whatchamacallit, see the center bore right here is what the disc actually rides on. It gives it no room for play. And so you have a little bit of rotational play, which doesn't matter because you'll clamp it down with the wheel. And the disc itself centers on the bore. So opening this up for a GM pattern does not in any way affect it. Because a lot of times, when I got a couple of nuts, so I could hold it in place real quick so it doesn't go anywhere while I'm installing the caliper. A lot of times, you'll buy cheap rotors drilled and slotted or whatever, and the holes will be a lot bigger than the studs. So those of you who think rotors are held on by studs, you are wrong. And those of you who buy rotors, make sure the rotors are hub centric to whatever hub you're using, the front hub, back hub, whatever. The hub bore is always going to be what holds the rotor centered. So you don't need GM rotors. You just open these up for a GM pattern. Because the function of the holes is to let the studs pass through them. It's not to center the rotor again. So now this is just a temporary measure, so I'm holding the rotor in place. Normally the wheel would be clamping it down, but then you take the caliper, you obviously install the studs, or not the studs, the install the pads, and then you would just simply slide the caliper over, make sure and line up the pads with the rotor and drop it in place. I'm not going to tighten it down because it has Loctite on it, and I don't want to waste the one shot, so to speak. But this is how they install. For an A body, the shock goes diagonally out, so there's room for this parking brake assembly right here. For a GMF body, you might be able to place it forward, but you got to be wary because this is the bump stop right here. There's gonna be a little rubber pad. So my frame rail goes right next to this. I don't know how much clearance I'm gonna have because this rear end is 1 inch narrower than the one I had. But if you have a 68 and up rear end, you buy a housing from say Quick Performance, for example, one of those ready-made housings that are like $350 or so. Check them for pricing. Obviously, I'm not a distributor of them. They'll be the proper width, so they'll be a little bit wider, and you don't have to worry about this hitting the frame rail. The frame rail will be right about here, so I'm fine. But if you narrow it anymore, you're gonna have to notch the frame rails. Locating this in the front, same thing. You can locate it in the front or the back, but whatever you do, make sure this bleed nipple is on top. That's key. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm almost done with the rear end of my 67 Tempest. Thank you.